Salofalava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuki. Coming up, Solomon Islands Prime Minister defeats leadership challenge. Also,
there was an assessment made by the office on that day, and unfortunately, the person who committed the crime turned around and behaved differently.
Samoa police seek more firearms power, and
there's quite a striking, unusual pattern that's developing in the ocean.
The southern hemisphere is rapidly heating up. Solomon Islands Prime Minister Jeremiah Manele has managed to survive a motion of no confidence in his leadership. It's the second challenge in 4 months mounted by Central Honiara MP Gordon Darcy, but after failing to garner enough support, he's been forced to withdraw. RNZ Pacific editor Koroi Hawkins has been following developments and joins me now. Hello Koroi, so what prompted this latest motion of no confidence?
Hello, Sana. So last week there was a mass resignation of ministers and backbenchers, about 10 of them led by the former Prime Minister Manasseh Songuvare from government. This gave rise to speculation that Jeremiah Manele had a high chance of being rolled. And they spoke to media after departing from government and said things like they were unhappy with Manele's leadership, that the reason the country was in such dire straits was because of his leadership and decision-making. So those were some of the things that were said by the group that left government.
After losing so many MPs, how was Manele's support looking heading into Parliament today?
Yes, so on the eve of the Parliament sitting, Manele put out a group photo. His office put out a group photo showing 28 MPs. We managed to contact the government house today and got a list of those MPs, and they included some new opposition and independent MPs that had not been in government before. They went and filled in the vacant ministerial portfolios. But that also saw some of the backbenchers who had left government come back to Jeremiah Manele. So he had quite a big majority by the looks of it heading into Parliament today.
So what was said in Parliament and what happens now?
Yeah, it was quite a weird day. The order paper for Parliament came out in the morning. The motion of no confidence wasn't on the order paper. Then Parliament sat for just a couple of minutes and the Speaker said they needed to adjourn to sort out an explanation for why there wasn't a no confidence motion on the order paper. And then in the afternoon, they resumed, and finally he said that the mover of the motion, Central Honiara MP Gordon Darcy Lilo, actually has withdrawn the motion. And the gist of it is that there wasn't enough support to oust Jeremiah Manele as Prime Minister. And there were a few contributions on the floor after the fact. One of the most interesting probably came from the Foreign Affairs Minister, Peter Chanel, who said that in his view there needs to be some kind of a grace period similar to what they have in Papua New Guinea, where a government has 18 months grace period on coming into power before a motion of no confidence can be moved against them. And this is probably in light of this being the second leadership challenge in about 4 and a bit months that's come against Manele, both moved by Gordon Darcy Lilo. So Parliament's now adjourned until Monday next week. Jeremiah Manele said this was to give time for the new ministers, some of whom will be first-time ministers, as I understand it, to acquaint themselves with their portfolios.
The police in Samoa believe their power to carry firearms should be extended, according to a well-placed source in the organisation. A senior officer told RNZ Pacific the fatal shooting of the former head of homicide last year sparked concern among officers that carrying firearms should be more regular. However, a formal proposal about the matter is yet to be made. The head of homicide, Detective Sergeant Beniamina Berite, was investigating a family shooting last July when the gunman turned and shot him with a .22 rifle. Neither he nor the other officers who attended were armed, and the lead detective died at the scene. Margot Staunton spoke to the Minister for Police and Prisons, Fawalo Harry Schuster, about the issue.
At present, our current law is when the circumstances warranted and there are reasonable grounds to arm the police, then they seek the approval of the Attorney General and the Minister to allow them to be armed for raids in circumstances where there's evidence that there's threat to their life.
In that particular case, I understand that there was no request for firearms. Is that right?
No, there was no request. I think in their assessment, they did not believe there was any situation which warranted them going out armed. There was an assessment made by the office on that day, and unfortunately, the person who committed the crime turned around and behaved differently.
They must have been aware he was armed, though.
They found out that a homicide had been committed, and then they sent out policemen to go and apprehend the offender. But they did not apply to be armed.
How long does it take for this approval process to go through?
Instantaneous, but they have to have the reasonable grounds on which to make the application.
What I've been told is that police feel that in the current environment, with the growing number of drug raids where firearms are being found, with the amnesty that failed to recover many firearms, that perhaps they should be given more leeway.
Yeah, I haven't seen a case made out for that situation. The way I see it, it is still police call. If they find out that a homicide is being committed, it is for them to make the assessment whether they want to go armed. If they wish to do that, then obtaining the consent is a very quick process.
You mentioned cultural issues that are involved. Can you explain that to me?
Our history from German and New Zealand administration was not quite. There were instances where our people were ostracized overseas, and one of our kings was killed. So our country's experience with firearms is not a pleasant one, and for that reason, our forefathers, in framing our constitution, decided that we should not have a military, only the police, and that the police will not be armed. Our culture is a culture of dialogue, so we try to resolve our differences through dialogue.
And what about the actual system that operates within the villages?
Yeah, 95% of our crime is dealt with in the village level. If all crimes that were committed at all of Samoa were brought to the police station, they would be swamped. So petty thefts and that are dealt with at village level, but the more serious crimes are brought to the police station. And the village councils are very effective at dealing with issues that arise within the village.
Do you not see a change in the criminal landscape there? One of the things that was said to me was that the police feel that things have changed, that, you know, with drugs being smuggled from American Samoa, with the number of people who've now got illegal firearms, with some bizarre murders you've had recently of quite young children. Do you not feel there might be a need for that?
They have to make out the case that the police need to be armed, and they have to show the evidence for that.
Are you not in favour of it at this stage?
Well, I know the status quo is okay unless it's shown to be defective and inadequate. Until a case is made out by the police that the current law in relation to them being armed is ineffective and inadequate, then they need to show that case.
In the wake of his resounding defeats of a vote of no confidence last month, Transparency International Papua New Guinea is calling on Prime Minister James Marape to take action over corruption. TI's chairman Peter Aitsi says the time for rhetoric has passed and Mr Marape now has a golden opportunity to take action ahead of the next elections. He explained his thinking to Don Wiseman.
We're now effectively 18 months away from the 2027 national elections, and so the opportunity or potential for the Prime Minister to face another vote of no confidence is now removed because of the constitutional protection that he's now afforded with 18 months to go before the next national elections. So we at TI believe that if the Prime Minister is really serious and genuine in his intent to stamp out corruption, this is the time that he has in order for him to take some serious action because of the security of his tenure that is now presented to him. So that's the call that we're making, is that if he's serious in the statements that he's been making with respect to combating corruption, now's the time to act.
You would like him to do what specifically?
Those that follow the work of TI will know that we've published many a report which shows a complete breakdown in terms of the accountability structures within PNG Public Service. There are reports of departments, agencies that have not acquitted their budget funding, and this is not 1 year, 2 years, this is in some instances 5 years. It's issues such as that the Prime Minister has got hard sort of data in order for him to make some decisions around the competence of those CEOs and secretaries that are heading these agencies. So what we're saying to him is if he's serious about combating corruption, if he's serious about combating non-performers, look at that information and sack those individuals.
A number of those individuals surely are actually within the cabinet, aren't they?
There are ministers that we believe have not performed or have not delivered any significant outcomes in the work of this current government. So that in itself, I think the Prime Minister, now that he's secured, should be emboldened enough to be able to take action on those ministers.
I know that Transparency PNG has spoken very strongly about the need to ensure the next elections operate better. There were lots of promises made soon after the election, but as you say, effectively only 18 months before the next one. How close are they to having an improved situation going into 2027?
Donna, we're gravely concerned because there has been no significant change to the structure of our Electoral Commission itself. There has been no significant change with respect to, firstly, the governance that the organisation operates under, the capabilities of the workforce that is tasked with the delivery of elections has not changed. There has not been consistent funding provided to the Electoral Commission to prepare itself or even to conduct its operation at any kind of reasonable level. So with that lack of support for those types of outcomes, clearly the government is negligent in terms of preparing for the 2027 elections based on those observations.
To what extent do you sense that this government takes notice of an organisation like Transparency?
Look, I think it can be seen over the years that there is some attention given to the comments made by TI. We see that in terms of the creation of more recent years, the creation of ICAC. We see that in terms of the response from the Prime Minister directed to some of our statements. And we also see that in terms of the government reaching out to TI to support some of its activities in terms of delivering national anti-corruption strategies. So I think there is a receptive ear and a healthy respect for the work of TI. The statements we're putting out is essentially a wake-up call, an alarm, a sounding of an alarm, because we're only 18 months away from the 2027 national elections.
And specifically, what do you want to see there?
Given the time we've got left, we've made three specific calls. One is to address the governance within the Electoral Commission, and we've suggested there, and we've put recommendations through to Parliament, suggesting that there be a three-person commission at least, so that there is more of an oversight of the activities of the Electoral Commission. I've raised the questions around the capabilities, competence of the current Electoral Commissioner, and in making the call for the Prime Minister to take action, we're also suggesting perhaps that his own position needs to be considered. By that I mean the current performance of the current Electoral Commissioner. The second is around publicly placing online the common roll and having it made available to the general public and the voters to be able to in a way vet themselves or find themselves on the common roll, and then put a process in there that allows for the common roll to be updated on a digital platform so that it can assist the work of us essentially updating our common roll. The third is to ensure that the Electoral Commission receives its full budget and receives it consistently over the remaining 18 months so that it can better prepare for the election. So those are the three main focus areas with respect to the elections.
How important is the committee that Alan Bird is heading?
Well, the work of that committee is now done, and their report has been tabled in Parliament. But in our statement, we're calling on the Prime Minister to champion that report now. It's a property of Parliament, so he, as our leader of government, needs to champion that report and bring through the recommendations that have been put forward by Governor Bird's committee.
A leading climate scientist has discovered the globe is warming faster around New Zealand, Tasmania and the North Pacific. Auckland University's Dr. Kevin Trenberth led a study that tracks warming rates across the world. It identified two zones located around 40 to 45 degrees latitude in both hemispheres. Kaya Selby spoke with Dr. Trenberth about what this means for Aotearoa and the Pacific region.
Well, what we have found is that there's quite a striking, unusual pattern that's developing in the oceans, especially with regard to ocean heat content. And so this relates to global warming and where the heat actually ends up going, because most of it, over 90% of it, ends up in the ocean. But most of it, it turns out, is accumulating in the extratropics at around the latitudes of New Zealand. And New Zealand is in one of the main regions where it is warming. So it's especially from about 35 to 45 degrees south across the entire Pacific and into the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean, and also in the Northern Hemisphere at similar latitudes. So off of Japan and off of the east coast of the United States in the vicinity of the Gulf Stream and in the vicinity of the Kuroshio in the Pacific. And, why is this? There's a gap in the subtropics where it's not warming much. And it turns out there are changes in ocean currents, coupled with changes in the atmospheric circulation, changes in the jet stream and where all of the storm tracks are going. And they are systematically changing the currents, and the currents and the sea temperatures in turn are supporting the changes in the atmosphere. And so this is a new aspect of how global warming is actually developing.
So implications for those kind of countries, land masses in those subtropic regions that you say aren't going to be warming as fast because they kind of fall out of those zones. Seems a little too good to be true that they might be out of the water. What are the kind of implications for those areas?
They're still quite warm regions, of course. The thing about warm water is that as it warms up, that encourages more activity in the atmosphere in that vicinity. And it means that in the places where it's really warm, any kind of storm, whether it's a tropical storm or even an extratropical cyclone, such as we've had in New Zealand in the last couple of weeks, then it picks up a lot more moisture out of the oceans and it dumps it down, and it also fuels the storms because it gives extra heat as the moisture precipitates out of the atmosphere. And so you have more active, bigger storms with heavier rainfalls. Now, one of the consequences of that, of course, is that these take heat out of the ocean and they tend to cool the ocean off. And so it's a bit up and down. It's a strongly interactive system, but no doubt the heat will come back into these regions because of the way in which the winds are changing in the atmosphere.
So it's new information. How can it be used by policymakers and decision makers?
Well, there's been some puzzlement in the overall climate community that's been expressed about why, the last 2 or 3 years have been so warm. 2023 was the warmest year on record, and then 2024 beat that one out. Now, that wasn't quite so surprising because there was an El Nino component that came into play. But 2025 through April has also got extraordinarily high global surface temperatures that are being recorded. And I think it comes back to what is really going on in the oceans. The oceans have now warmed up so that they're major players in the global warming picture and affecting things. And, I don't think it'll go back to the way it was before.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.